in German.
Yeah.
Is she here? No, already. Put her on the blacklist, one traitor more. No, because I checked it up. Yes, it's incredible. The big German excuse is now it's all they are not anti-Semitic at all. It's all the fault of the immigrants, of course. No, sorry. Also, yeah, but in Germany it's the official policy. No, I mean like here it's probably more at the level of rumors. In Germany, it's leading. Okay, sorry.
Okay, very, very short introduction because Slavoj Zizek has to leave at 4 promptly. So I just wanted to say for those who were not here yesterday, or for those who were here yesterday, we heard under the heading Interpretation as a Political Act, this very grim outlining of repetitions and resonances and resemblances on a world historical scene, specifically Israel and Gaza. And in the course of that, Slavoj promised us more philosophy. So let's see. And I should have said welcome to this event from Birkbeck Institute for the Humanities. So I'll hand over to Slavoj.
Thanks very much. If you want more philosophy/theology, I just am in conversation to come here again, the usual 2 days stuff in somewhere late March. I will misuse you and others to make propaganda for my new book on this. But on the other hand, yesterday I made the mistake of looking at podcasts and so on. And my God, the world is really going crazy. It makes me so sad. First, I found multiple other podcasts done by Jews on what is going on now in the West Bank city of Hebron. It's really like Nazi anti-Semitic procedures. Settlers are simply, because this is the only genuine city where parts are Jewish, parts are Palestinians, and they are simply marking the Palestinian houses with a red color, and then personal pressure, beating them. And the horror is that nobody is ashamed. Like, they don't do it secretly, discreetly. They're doing it publicly, no? And you know that the thing that I once thought is a joke, you know, they are literally repeating it. You know, that idea of, because, you know, and that's, I consider a great thing. Israel is maybe the most atheistic country in the world. And people are saying that old joke, it's a reality. I don't believe in God, but nonetheless, he gave us this land, you know, like, no problem. On the other hand, to be balanced, you know why I never understood? Some bad thing, I want to insult everybody about Arabs. You know that, I think it still goes on, except Egypt and maybe Dubai. They like money, tourists. If you enter Israel, they don't put a stamp into your passport, but you are just given a piece of paper. Why? Because out of kind of kindness, because I asked, idiot as I am, why? And he told me, well, if you want to visit any Arab land around, if they check the stamp, if they see Israeli stamp, you are not allowed to enter. No? Another bad story, maybe just to warm things up. It's such a sad world where only horrors happen. Did I already tell it to you? Interrupt me if I did. A couple of years ago, I was flying to London with a Slovene doctor, specialized for emergency cases. And he told me that he's moving to the UK. He was a top specialist. That he told me that for a couple of years, he was in Dubai. And why are you leaving Dubai? He said, no, it was nice. He lived in a privileged suburb with house, half the Olympic size, swimming pool, everything, a lot of money, English school for his children. But he said he didn't go. Why? You know what was his main duty? Every weekend, it was his time to work day and night for 72 hours, because every weekend, at least 10,000, even more, wealthy tourists come, especially from Saudi Arabia and other rich Emirates, to do prostitution. And they are literally untouchable, which means they are beating women, cutting them, and so on. And the authorities bring these women to him, brought these women to him, like patch them up any way you can. And then he asked the innocent question, which I love. I'm, in my mind, a bureaucrat, no? Okay, but how do I put this into my books? They told him, you don't. These women legally don't exist. So even if they are half dead, some of them died, this is not, these brutal rapists are untouchable, you know. So my lesson is very sad one. The whole world is a shit, to cut a long story. But yesterday I mentioned that Argentinian guy, to provoke you, if some of you are from there, Milei, or what, the new president. I think that I know that Peronism was split, left wing, right wing, and so on. But I think that at its most basic, Peronism was a neo-fascist movement. The basic idea was peace of the class, peace, and so on. So no wonder that Peron did what he did. You know, in 1945, he printed 400,000 of Argentinian passports, distributed them around Europe and North Africa. Said, any German who comes, you don't ask for anything, you just give him Argentinian citizenship. So I think that it didn't work, even economically, Peronism. You know that in the golden 20s, 1920s, Argentina was, well, one of the 6, 7 richest countries in the world. And then they had the crisis, early 30s, but then they never picked up. And I think it was Peronism and reactions to it. So maybe I always also try to look at the good side of things. Maybe Milei will force the opposition to abandon these Peronist dreams, to begin from a new point. Okay, enough of this, let's begin doing it. Now I would like to begin, before we go to, as I promised, vagaries of anti-Semitism. Incidentally, I just heard from Haer. They will print my text, but they even didn't ask me. If you listen to my yesterday's talk, you can immediately guess what they insisted on throwing out. My favorite part, that imagined phone call, you know, obscene. And it's typical how, okay, maybe they are right. They said there are idiots who may take this as a conspiracy theory, with all my provisos and so on. I accept, what can I say? Although, as my friend Udi Aloni, who is a mediator here, told me that, you know, what you get there is, you know, this is my eternal joke, how we get today a thing without its substance. Decaffeinated coffee, desserts, sweet, with patisserie without sugar, and so on. And he told me, okay, in Haaretz, they will get decaffeinated Zizek, you know, without my obscenities. But what I want to talk today is precisely this little bit more refined dialectic between appearance, truth, what is traumatic in truth. My target is the idea that what is traumatic, this is, I think, really an honest anti-totalitarian, anti-brutal power moment. My target today will be the idea that, and it's a very refined way to praise brutal people, you know, the idea that nonetheless there is something heroic in totalitarians. Like most of us, sorry to be, I don't want to point at anybody because I will be in a justified way problem, but let's say you, I don't know who. I'm still restrained normal under quotation mark. Okay, not very normal, but so somehow human being. So if somebody were to tell me, why don't I torture that guy, first pull his eyes out, whatever, his testicles, make him swallow his own testicles. This is standard procedure, incidentally, in torture today, no? I wouldn't be able to do it. But to claim that people who are able to do it are some kind of ethical heroes is deeply deceiving. The point is to show how even those who did this are still avoiding the truth, escaping the truth. What do you mean by this? I'm of course referring, but yesterday the moment that was full of anxiety for me was, will those clips work, you know? So I wanted to, but you saw probably a movie which is now exactly, or 1 year more than 30 years old, Rob Reiner's A Few Good Men, that central scene, viral, everybody knows it, where Tom Cruise addresses Jack Nicholson, a brutal general, with "I want the truth." And Jack Nicholson character shouts back, "You can't handle the truth." The idea is a very precise one and deeply reactionary, that, yeah, we can afford to be liberals, respect human rights, blah, 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 but somebody has to do the dirty work for us, discreetly, and we can't handle that. Now, as I already indicated, I think that this pseudo-heroic stance, this stance of I am ready to do the dirty thing so that you can sleep in calm, is in itself a lie. Whenever you encounter cases like this, and this also, up to a point, explain Holocaust. Let's take Holocaust. No, the Nazis, I think even Hannah Arendt, with all my respect for her, was wrong, as I often said, even here. It's more complex. She was, I think I already repeated this line here, but it's my favorite. A guy whom I appreciate immensely, Pierre Bayard, developed in one of his books a wonderful theory. The theory is that quite often a new concept is introduced, a concept which is very productive, useful, but as a rule, the concrete example which prompted an author to introduce this concept is false, is a fake. And he gives, okay, 3 examples. I will limit myself not to lose your time to 2. First is precisely Hannah Arendt, The Banality of Evil. The idea is that basically Adolf Eichmann was just an ordinary bureaucrat, and I almost, you know, when I say that I love something, it means ultimate obscenity, no? I almost love his basic defense, which is, why are you bothering with details, Holocaust? I didn't know anything about it. I was a simple organizer of train, so many trains from here, there, and so on, you know. Now, I think this notion is useful. Banality of evil. for today's bureaucratic functioning of power. It is what we usually call collateral damage, you know, today in more refined terms. And this is, for me, the most, the lowest point, you must know it, of, how was she called? My God, who was the Secretary of State, Foreign Minister under Clinton, that woman? Madeleine Albright. Yes, sorry. Yeah, getting senile. You know, against Bernie Sanders, she said that there must be special place in hell for women who prefer Bernie to Hillary Clinton, for women who neglect Clinton. My answer would be, I wrote about it, maybe some of you know it. No, if there is hell, which I doubt, I think hell is already here on this earth. If there is hell, then there is a special place in it for anyone, woman, man, trans, who can say something that Madeleine Albright said at another interview. She was asked, do you think that 500,000 of children that died in American bombardment of Iraq, that it's a price worth to pay? She said yes. I mean, those guys should go to hell. But what I wanted to say is that let's return to return to this. You can't handle the truth. Sorry, no, step by step. So this guy Bayar went to study in detail Eichmann's life and discovered, no, he was absolutely not this banality of evil bureaucrat. Already as a young boy, he was part of gangs beating the Jews and so on. No, sorry, he was not that. Another false concept, I like it, because I always like things which undermine these big liberal compassion examples. You know, I forgot where, I think in Queens, not Brooklyn, I think 62 or 65 is a classical example of mass psychology. A lady girl from Manhattan was returning home late in the evening, and somebody attacked her with a knife and raped her. It was a long process. Like, he hit her a little bit, she ran away, he again caught her, she was shouting. It took 20 minutes, almost half an hour. Lights were turned on, and the shock is allegedly, the shock which was confirmed, is that dozens of people were just observing it, not one called the police. Now, Bayar again did something, I like this evil approach. He checked it up in police archives. Everything was there. First, it's not true that dozens of lights were turned on, just 2 or 3, and both called the police. The police didn't take it seriously. So, but to avoid a misunderstanding, I think that this notion is very useful. It happens, but it's not simply the evil of women, because some intelligent social psychologists repeated this as an experiment and discovered this. If you presume that when you see something horrible, if you see that other peoples are also observing it, you don't want to stick out. But if you think or know that you are alone seeing it, probably you do alert police. So it's a more complex logic. Okay, but it does happen. It's a good example. But again, the shock is that although this example, concrete, was fake, wrong, nonetheless, it became a very useful concept. And that triggers my dialectical, maybe, mind. Why to propose a correct right theory, you have to begin with an example which is wrong. But let me go on. So Eichmann and so on. You know what's the problem with the Nazis? No, they were not brutal heroes, even in a horrible sense, who were ready to do something horrible. They were able to do these things because they couldn't handle the truth. The truth, to put it in very simple, traditional Marxist terms, the truth of the social antagonism. Why? They were targeting the Jews because what they couldn't confront was not reality, but, in Lacanian terms, the real of the social antagonism. The fact that German society was immanently, not because of the Jewish intruders, traversed by social tensions, antagonisms, which, again, cannot be explained by an external intruder. Their basic vision was a fiction, a lie. But they needed this lie. They couldn't handle the social truth to be able to do all the horrors. And this is what, as I already, I think, developed here, this is what I find so horrible in today's global political space. Namely, that this secret part, like do it privately, secretly, no, this is typical liberal hypocrisy. We know that dirty things has to be done, but keep it secret there. We will protest a little bit, but we are aware that heroic acts are necessary, you know, which is, for me, at least one of the most horrible examples of this in not Latin America, but those islands around Cuba, Caribbean, and so on. You know what happened in Dominican Republic in 1937? The Haiti island was divided. The East was Dominican Republic doing better. The West was Haiti, which, because they dared to do the Black Revolution, were systematically punished. I will not go into the story, you probably know it, by the West, kept impoverished. So poor Haitis were constantly penetrating, like today's immigrants, the Dominican Republic space. And to prevent this, Trujillo, Rafael, the dictator, who ruled till, I think, mid-60s, or when he died in an attempt, and then his regime that he established crumbled, they killed probably around 40,000 Haiti people at the border, and it's well known as the this, how do you call it, when you differently pronunciate the same word? Sorry? Yeah, shibboleth. I'm so sorry. I'm really getting senile. Because the Dominican soldiers were just stopping people there close to the border and showed them parsley and asked them, how do you, what is this? Because, you know, Haiti was more French speaking, Dominican Republic was Spanish, and they pronounced it in different way. If you pronounced it in the wrong way, you were instantly shot. But what I consider so sad is that when towards the end of his life, early 60s, I think, Trujillo was asked, which act of you are most proud of? He said, this massacre. He said, I did a great crime, yes, a great heroic thing for my country. And I find this so depressing that today it's not even that they hide it. It is as if they are doing it openly, in the sense that we are all fascinated by these heroic images of those who are allegedly our saviors, and courage is redefined not as courage even under pressure to courage to stick to your basic decency, but, basic decency is claimed to be a form of cowardice. And the true courage is defined as your strength to do the horrible thing for the sake of your country. This was done, I already repeated this here many times, I know, by the Nazis, unfortunately by the Soviets around 1930 in, for example, when the early Stalinists were training cadre to do the compulsory collectivization, they told them, you will be exposed to great temptations. You will see their starving children, mothers, starving mothers crying. But if you, for a moment, feel a compassion for them, you are a traitor. The true greatness is to step over this. And this logic is returning today. Where, how? Now comes a more problematic part, maybe, but I don't really think what I promised you. I think that, and I am, of course, not blaming the Jews, just something strange measured by the standards of the Jewish history itself, strange, happened with the establishment of the state of Israel. In what sense? In Heydrich's terms, you remember I quoted yesterday Heydrich, who said, bad assimilationists, good Zionists. In Heydrich's terms, among Jews, Zionism won over assimilationism. Now, the problem here is that what did this do to the status of Jews, the way they are considered by Western racism? And here I will take, as I already announced, yesterday, the very sad example of Heidegger. I say sad example because Heidegger was, whatever you say, unfortunately, a really great thinker. And, you know, I don't like these Habermasian attempts to say, if he wrote this, then he is not really a thinker. People like Richard Wallim repeat, he was simply a Nazi. He doesn't even deserve to be treated as a serious philosopher. It's too easy. So again, let's go to the worst and to see how this, unfortunately, cannot be dismissed as an empirical error of Heidegger, but is part of his philosophical edifice, his anti-Semitism, which wasn't, of course, openly stated in his works, but when they published the black, so-called Schwarze Bogen, or wrote black notes, it is clear. The problem, and it's not that these were private diaries. No, he himself insisted that they should be these daily reflections that Heidegger wrote, that they should be part of his Gesammelte Werke, complete works. So in 1939, Heidegger had urged an examination of, quote, Judentum's juris predisposition to planetary criminality, planetarischen Verbrechertum. Why? A quote. With their market gift for calculation, the Jews life in quotation mark, as if Jews are monsters, they are not really living beings. The Jews live according to the principle of race, and indeed have done so for the longest time, for which reason they themselves most vigorously resist its unrestricted application. The arrangement of racial breeding stems not from life itself, but from the hyper-empowerment of life by, Heidegger uses the term Machenschaft, which is like machination, the spirit of machination. What this brings about with such planning is a complete deracination, loss of the roots of peoples, by harnessing them in a uniformly constructed and streamlined arrangement of all entities. Along with deracination goes a self-alienation of peoples, the loss of history, that is to say, of the regions of decision for being. Now, let's elaborate this a little bit. It's simple, but we have to read it clearly. Heidegger's conceptual opposition here is the one between authentic historical being, which is also, Heidegger repeat itself, rooted in certain land, in certain, not in, of course, just physical sense, but a certain, let's call it in a totally inappropriate term, Heidegger would have exploded, cultural horizon, cultural complex. Each ethnic group is characterized or even constituted by a specific, what Heidegger called disclosure of being, how reality discloses itself to us, our all historical myths, traditions, everyday mores, customs, and so on. This is always historically specified. What happens for Heidegger, potentially already with ancient Greek philosophy, but especially with modernity, is that with modern universalism, is that we lose this sense of concrete historical belonging. For Heidegger, being limited to a certain spiritual horizon, what it means in the spiritual sense, to be German, to be British, and so on, is not a limitation, but it's precisely what makes a group historical in the deepest sense. And for Heidegger, Jews, because they are homeless, betray this. They don't, although they pretend to be faithful to their religious identity, they perceive themselves what as homeless abstract masters whose goal is not to live a concrete, meaningful historical life, but to treat external reality, nature, other people as objects of manipulation and exploitation, especially modern scientific exploitation. Heidegger goes quite far here. He even says at some point that no wonder Jews know so much about mathematics and so on. They just like this abstract approach. When they see a city in a forest, their view is not, my God, how do people there relate to a forest, a horizon of meaning? How is forest located into their mythology and so on? And Heidegger would have probably evoked here a composer, musical, who was very popular in Nazi Germany in 1930s, who even I'm not politically pure here, sometimes enjoy Jan Sibelius. You know, for example, it's quite nice. What's that? Okay, forget everything. His last big work, oops, no, it will come to me. Symphonical poem is about, you really feel the concreteness, what spiritually means to Finns. He was a Finnish composer of Finnish countryside with all the storms, forests, lakes, and so on and so on. Heidegger's counterpoint would have been a Jew would not be able to do that. A Jew would just think, okay, there are people there. How can I exploit the forest? Should we eliminate those people, or should we use them as slaves to cut down forest and so on? That's the idea. Now, again, incidentally, Sibelius was pretty sympathetic to Nazi Germany, but that's another story. Now, there is a way to defend Heidegger here, popular with some thinkers. It is to say that Heidegger, in his anti-Semitism, confuses two things. First, the metaphysical stance of ruthlessness of this abstract technological exploitative relationship to your environs, which in any case predominates today. Today's civilization is as such. Heidegger admits this. But then he always mentions just, he really hated, for him French were superstitious. It's English, Americans, and Russians. He always liked to repeat, metaphysically, America and Russia are the same, instead of it's both, in both cases, this terrifying technological civilization. But Heidegger identifies this metaphysical predisposition with concrete people, the Jews, which embodies this stance with in their empirical existence. So the way they try to save Heidegger, I think even the guy who was definitely a leftist, even a communist, I liked him, proclaimed to be, he now unfortunately died, Gianni Vattimo, the early postmodernist. This was more or less, maybe I'm mistaken, his way to save Heidegger. Forget about the Jews, he was concrete, he was not just the great philosopher, Heidegger was also a stupid local guy from that area, Schwarzwald, whatever, there around Freiburg, and like he made a mistake, and that's the finesse of this defense of Heidegger. He made a mistake which precisely his philosophy warns about, because his entire philosophy is about the difference between ontological, which is the horizon of meaning, and ontic level, entities, reality out there in the world. Heidegger's basic point is that Jews don't see that reality is never just an abstract object of technological exploitation. It's always our understanding of reality. It's always rooted in a certain horizon, metaphysical horizon of meaning. So that it's not only society, also the point of Sibelius, the way the things relate to their lakes and forests. It's totally different from the way Germans, French do, and so on and so on. Now, so again, the solution is, and it can be put very elegantly, that the only way to save Heidegger is through Heidegger himself. That to apply his own notion of ontological difference and to claim measured by your own standards, you are making a mistake here. you are confusing a certain metaphysical stance, modern technological manipulation, exploitation, calculation, with a concrete empirical people. Unfortunately, this doesn't work, I think, because it's not only Jews that Heidegger understands in this way. The counterpoint to Jews are, of course, the Germans. And till the end, Heidegger emphasizes that the German people are the only properly metaphysical people. All others, French, Americans, you here, of course, can succumb to this Jewish trap, become imperialists, blah, blah, but Germans are the only people who are, or which are authentically rooted in their historical environment. So Heidegger goes to the end here. The absolute opposition. First, Germans are an exception. And the ultimate conflict today, the conflict between what Heidegger calls this nihilism of modern technology, where we are all reduced to objects of scientific experiments, economic exploitation, mass culture, and so on. And on the other hand, a proper metaphysical new beginning, new approach to reality, new spirituality, can only ease the conflict ultimately between Jews and Germans, and this is a matter of a struggle to death. One pole has to destroy, Heidegger uses the term often in his black notebooks, Vernichtung, has to annihilate the other. There is no compromise here. And now I come to what, now this is for me the really depressing quote. Heidegger here does not, one would have thought, that's his perversity, that he would simply say, okay, it's us Germans against the Jews, and it's a big metaphysical conflict, don't count bodies and so on, that's minor. This was his reaction when Holocaust became known. It was, no, this is already a Jewish approach. Like, is it 6 million Jews or 5.5 or what? No, you don't see the metaphysical dimension that with the defeat of Germany, Jews won over the West, over European spirituality. And then he links to the Jews, our popular culture, which loses, whatever you want. But so he could have said, okay, we had to do this, otherwise Jews would have done this to us. No, he goes, as already indicated yesterday, a step further. He paints, and he is unique here, I think. He paints a picture of Holocaust from which Germans already, they did it, disappear. He claims that Holocaust was the supreme climatic point of modern nihilism because it was at the same time the highest Vernichtung, technological destruction of thousands, and he likes to quote in this very weird fragment from after World War II, when it was known that what happened in the Holocaust is that people were no longer properly dying. You know, in this authentic sense, you are close to death, you think about the meaning of your life, finitude, all that bullshit, you know. And since I am now old, 74, now I think a different tone. Did you look, one of the greatest movies did you see of all time? Kidding, Sound of Music. You know that disgusting song, I am 60 going to 17. Now my song is I'm 74 going to 75, you know. And my friends did something wonderful to me. They invited me to celebrate my birthday last March, and they really trained themselves well. They sang this version of the song, my God. Only this either an ultimate enemy or a true friend does something like this to you. And I think they were. But what I want to say is that Heidegger says that in the Holocaust, bodies were just produced in the same way that in mechanical agriculture. You don't properly grow the earth with personal care like an authentic farmer. You do it just in an industrial way. Everything is done industrially. In the same way, in the Holocaust, corpses, bodies were just produced. The victims didn't properly die in this, again, authentic sense. You know, again, there are many people who defend here Heidegger, claiming that that's precisely the horrible point that he's trying to describe, that in Holocaust, you were not even allowed to properly die. You were simply reduced to an object to be technologically annihilated. I, unfortunately, oppose this version. You know why? Because, yes, it was like this, but not for the Jews who were killed. It was like this for the perpetrators, for Germans. Who knows how Jews experienced it? One cannot even imagine what horror this was for them. I mean, this is why I always like, maybe it was these extreme movies, like I always emphasize this. I told it here a couple of times. You know how no wonder that all good movies about Holocaust are comedies. Not because it was a joke, but when things are really horrible, you cannot do a tragedy. The basis of a tragedy is you have a dignified author who heroically makes a faithful decision, and then this decision is his downfall, you know. But in the universe of concentration camps, and here, now don't kill me if I say this, but I mean it in a very, it's my nature that I provoke people all the time. There is a point where I agree with, who is the great one? Obscenity, David Irving. No. His nightmare. Don't understand me. But I spoke with people who were in Auschwitz, and there is one element that David Irving, notes correctly. Auschwitz was selected as the symbolic site, you know. But then, and I asked my Polish friends, they told me it's true. What you have there is one gas oven, and my friends confirmed me. Go to the edge of that building and you will find a metal plate saying constructed by the Polish government in 1948. So it was built as a symbolic place. Frankly, no wonder that now the people are horrified, because it became, you know, when you visit Poland, it's very practically located, Auschwitz. It's near Krakow, the big old town, which Stalin ordered Soviet army not to destroy it because it's historically important and so on. So you make a detour there, selfies are made, you already have a store for memorials like here around the corner, all those London tourist souvenir shops, you have it there. And I agree only here with David Irving that a much worse horror are the three others, no? Sobibor, Treblinka, and I think Bergen-Belsen or what. These were the true horrors. And here, all honor goes to Russians and Jews in those absolutely terrible conditions, they did it. They did in 43, 44 a successful uprising. They noticed how the guards work, and during the night, blah, blah, they slaughtered silently most of the guards. 60, 70 of them, prisoners, escaped, and the Germans caught only, I think, about half of them. The other half escaped. It was, for me, in those desperate conditions, because again, Sobibor was not like Dachau. Dachau is a good place near Munich. I would like to be in Dachau. Not quite, but you know why? Because remember, Dachau was a working camp, not the annihilation camp. There you were used, but this Sobibor, Treblinka, just factories of death. So let's go on. How does Heidegger interpret the Holocaust? Again, the idea is this one. Jews are, on the one hand, supreme technological manipulators producing industrially fruits, corpses, machine, whatever. But at the same time, they are a concrete living being. And what is more logical than to bring this duality to an extreme and made the Jews apply this nihilistic stance to themselves? Heidegger sees in this some kind of a, sorry for the term, poetic justice. The logic introduced and sustained and embodied by the Jews, the logic of reducing everything to object of technological destruction, manipulation, and so on, was applied to them. Quote, this is for me one of the most horrible Heideggers, quote, only when what is essentially Jewish in the metaphysical sense, this technological sense, battles against the Jewish, is turned against the Jews themselves, is the pinnacle of self-annihilation in history attained. Assuming that what is Jewish has everywhere seized dominion entirely for itself, so that even the battle of the Jewish, and this above all, becomes subjection to it. So, you know, like Holocaust is the because Jews, the idea is pretty tasteless and vulgar, even with my bad taste. The idea is, since Jews don't have a proper spiritual horizon, experiencing life as impenetrable, meaningful horizon of meaning, they cannot say that technology endangers their own meaningful being. The only way they can treat themselves ultimately is the same way they treat others. So you see, of course, Heidegger is aware that the Germans effectively did it, but it's in a terrifying sense, a wonderful reformulation, a false step from concrete to abstract, where Germans in their particularity, all these questions, but why were Germans obsessed by it, disappears. All we have is the pathologies of German historical development. All this disappears, and Germans become just an anonymous perpetrator of the self-annihilation of the Jews themselves. So to bring this to the end, Heidegger implies that the Nazis, when they organized the Holocaust, they were just, they were really the victim of Judentum, of the Jewishness, because they took upon themselves They stood for metaphysical Jewish principle of production of corpses, in the same way as you produce objects in industry, against the concrete historical being. So Nazis were in the Holocaust seduced by Jews. They embodied Jewishness in the metaphysical sense. I'm tempted to say, and it's not a bad joke, I'm tempted to say that in some sense Heidegger is right here, but he should just have turned it around. What if we say that, and this would be my immediate answer, that in reality, first, it's obvious what I will say now. I always fight with my Jewish friends because I remain an atheist Christian, you know. That's my point. What do you mean by atheist Christian? I mean, and it's incredible. I begin to like Christianity because I noticed that, you know, a couple of Baptist colleges in southern United States are again inviting me. Then I told them, but listen, are you crazy? I'm an atheist. They said, no, we find very interesting. And one of my proudest publications is, do you know, if some of you are from Italy, what is Osservatore Romano? The official journal of Vatican. I published 2 texts there. I don't know what is happening today. But what I want to say is that my reading of Christianity, to simplify it to the utmost, is God dies. To quote Hegel, what dies on the cross is not a representative of God. It's not God is up there, we are here, and God sent Jesus, and then, okay, guys, you screwed it up, this time it didn't work, wait for hundreds of years, maybe I will send another one. No, as Hegel put it, what dies on the cross is the God of beyond itself. That's Hegel's reading. Because what comes under crucifixion is not God, it's the Holy Ghost. And Holy Ghost is simply the spirit of a new egalitarian community, where, as, and Badiou developed this in his book on St. Paul, where there are no men and women, there are no Jews and Greeks, like egalitarian community. So what I want to say is that I want just to state this obviously, that the wealth of the Jewish tradition, which is a very deep, all of these religions, Jews, Muslims, all the different Muslim mysticisms and so on, even those who are considered in Islam the darkest, I always loved them. You know the story of Alamut, those perfect assassins. They existed, but they are my heroes. Wait a minute. They are supposed to be perfect murderers. No, they were murderers of the highest standard. What they were basically doing is they were, as a rule, hired by lower class exploited people to kill a bad tyrant. And this idea that, you know, that I read somewhere that our word assassin comes from hashish. The idea is that they were how could they be so perfect, not afraid of death? Oh, they must have been drugged by hashish. Never in original Alamut text surviving do you find this. This is clearly a Western invention. We, the West Crusaders, couldn't see how such dedication is possible because they had extreme stand. If by mistake, let's say you, sorry to be personal, let's say I have to kill you, no? It happens, you know, it happens, yeah. Yeah. And let's say that by mistake I kill you also, no? I would be liquidated by assassins. No. Their rule is never, it's absolutely unexcusable. that's what we have. Let's learn from them today. To them, this collateral damage was prohibited. No, this is why sometimes they waited for days, for weeks, so that they were sure they kill only that person. But okay, so that I don't get lost, how could Heidegger totally ignore Jewish spirituality, which, for example, my God, was shockingly deep? Do you know, for example, what that this idea that before creating the world, God had to create nothing as an open space for the world? That's incredible. And without this, you cannot properly understand neither Christian nor Muslim mysticism and so on. Because the true problem of mystics was always not God created the world, but what had to happen before, the conditions of possibility of the creation of the world, or as my favorite, more and more, even maybe more than Hegel, German idealist Schelling said in his Ages of the World, at the beginning was the word. But what happened before the beginning? That's the metaphysical problem. But okay, let's not lose time. So that's the problem with Heidegger. The lesson of Heidegger is what? That, and today we see it, in today's capitalism, global capitalism, which precisely unites the two aspects that Heidegger thought they can be opposed. Brutal global technological exploitation, justified in or experienced as part of being rooted in a particular tradition. This is what Erdogan is trying to do. This is what Modi is trying to do in India. That's the difficult thing to grasp. How today any invocation of specific race, cultural horizon is already part of the global technological exploitation. You cannot oppose the nihilism of self-destructive dimension of global capitalism by playing upon, by mobilizing some particular roots which resist the capitalist union. This is why, how was he called, Oscar, the guy, our Latino-American friend? Yeah, is he here? No, nice, then I can say something against him. No, because I remember, because I always mocked him, he was, maybe he is no longer, one of those guys who thought if you look at Incas or some culture, you find something that escaped the Western imperialist logic, the site of resistance, no? And the last time I spoke with him, he tried to convince me that, okay, he said Incas, like David Graeber idea that, you know, Inca and so on. Okay, I concede it, that doesn't work, but he said, but you know, somewhere deep in Amazon, there is a tribe which has the answer. We should look to him. I mean, I find this totally unacceptable. This idea that you will find some unspoiled origin untouched with our civilization. No, again, Nazis were already doing it. It will shock you. Do you know, if you are educated, then you must have seen that disgusting movie, 7 Years in Tibet. What is not enough emphasized in the movie is that the character, the German, was played by Brad Pitt, was sent there by the Nazis. The Nazi idea was that the moment you go down to swamplands, to flat, it's already Semitic. Even if it's not Jews, it's already corruption. Only in the pure air up there in Himalayas do you find purity. So it was not only that one. Do you know that the Nazis sent 7 expeditions to Tibet, doing all their racial measures and so on, studying it, because they thought that literally Germans are bringing back something that can only be understood as a repetition of or returning to this mystery of Tibet. Well, they didn't go far enough because friends convinced me that Tibet itself is rooted in Mongolia. You know that the term Dalai Lama is Mongolian, but that's another story. Okay, let's go on. Now, I didn't lose my line of thought. I want to point out that how would Heidegger have reacted to the fact that with the establishment of the state of Israel, it is as if the Jews somehow admitted, yes, maybe the Nazis were right, we also need concrete land, concrete roots, you know, or as French right-wing philosopher Alain Finkielkraut wrote in 2015 in a letter to Le Monde, the Jews, they have today chosen the path of rooting. So it is as if the Jews have read Heidegger and established, my God, that guy was right. We also need a concrete historical experience. We no longer have to be just self-annihilating wandering Jews. But I think, and I don't blame Jews here, this is a very dangerous attempt and a big argument for the greatness of the Jewish community. Many of them are aware of it. Why? Let me explain this by, the deep ambiguity or even three meanings of the traditional Jewish greeting saying, next year in Jerusalem, pronounced at the end of Seder, the religious meal served in Jewish home to commence the festival of Passover. Many Jews who believe strongly in the importance of a Jewish state see next year in Jerusalem as an expression of the need to protect Jerusalem and Israel as it exists today. Others think that the Jerusalem mentioned in next year in Jerusalem is more an ideal of what Jerusalem could be for them. Next year in Jerusalem is a prayer that Israel will move closer to this ideal. It's a symbol of utopia, and it's more a metaphysical hope of bringing peace to earth than a concrete empirical idea of, okay, why just dream about next year in Jerusalem? We have it now. Then there is the third version, which is, I think, the worst, the most dangerous. A kind of synthesis of the first two. The logic is, now that we have Jerusalem, next year it will be rebuilt with Palestinian buildings destroyed and a new big temple constructed again on the site of Al-Aqsa Mosque and so on. Like, we have Jerusalem, but it's not the real Jerusalem yet. So we have to ethnically cleanse it and so on to make it really ours. What I want to go back to Heidegger, this duality of empirical existence, entities in the world, and the transcendental horizon, we have here again this opposition. For the proponents of next year in Jerusalem means let's try to get Jerusalem back. It simply means let's get the city about which we were dreaming for thousands of years. The problem, of course, as every hermeneutician will tell you, is that those dreams were penetrated by certain utopian dimension of an ideal spiritual place, blah, blah, blah. But you know, when you get the real place, what happens with that utopian dimension? So on the other hand, the let's call it transcendentalists, and they're a minority, but a strong minority. I respect them very much, although they sometimes go too far. Those who cling to this metaphysical utopian idea of Jerusalem. Next year in Jerusalem doesn't mean, oh, let's occupy a city. It means let's spiritually renew us to find home and so on. You know what's the irony? And that's why I don't also idealize them. It's that they're very popular among some Muslim fundamentalists because and even in Israel, there are a couple of them, I found their podcasts, who defend Palestinians now because they said, sorry, eternal Israel is not about occupying land. It's about our spiritual renewal. And no wonder that now that is a perverted excess. But I remember Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, you remember him. He organized, it must be now already some 15 years ago, maybe you know better, a big Congress symposium in Tehran about how to get rid of Israel as a state. And you know that there was a dozen of very orthodox rabbis there. He said, yes, you are right. It's an obscenity to identify eternal Israel with that city there. And Ahmadinejad, it was an obscenity, but I almost respected him. I remember seeing it on TV. He embraced, greeted these rabbis, you are my friends, and so on. It was an incredible obscenity. But for them, again, to confuse the transcendental notion of Jerusalem with the empirical city is the ultimate blasphemy. And I think that this is a problem for what to do now that the Jews more or less have Jerusalem, and now they want to have all of Judea. The danger, of course, is double here. A, that they will lose the proper utopian metaphysical dimension, which was clearly at work in this eternal dream next year in Jerusalem, which was simply the dream of an emancipated, egalitarian society and had nothing to do with any type of brutal nationalist assertion. The second danger, even worse, is that when you identify next year in Jerusalem with, now we have Jerusalem itself, you get very close to the logic that I hinted at before, and to the logic, sorry, I'm losing, okay. Namely, the logic of what in the last time I was here, I think already developed. And to get a notion of this, please read Alenka Zupancic's book on Antigone. This idea of the founding crime, you know. Alenka wonderfully begins with, I am with her, with this eternal joke, which is more than ever actual today. This joke about, anthropologists, explorers come to a tribe and said, are there still cannibals with you? They answer, no, just yesterday we ate the last one. No? I think that the danger of now we have Jerusalem, if you take it too literally, is that you regress, fall into this logic of the sacred crime that is needed to commit to establish a new order. Now, My God, how time is running. You know what I propose you? Who is, you are there. Can I, because I nonetheless want to deliver to you in some sense what I have. Can I, do you have, my KGB agent, do you have their emails? Yes. So I will send you a full new unpublished text on all this so that I promise you this evening. The only problem is that evening, not afternoon, because as I told you, my God, I have to go to Stanmore now at 4 to visit Hanif and so on, and I will do something very risky. I will keep to my obscenity, because really to be sympathetic to friends in trouble, I learned it once, is to be obscene. Because when he got this total paralysis, I tried to, and it worked for a week or two at the beginning. I tried to amuse him by saying, you can imagine what? By evoking Stephen Hawking. You remember why? Stephen Hawking, although he was also totally crippled, discovered with pleasure that erection of penis is not controlled by this system. This is why it wasn't a fake. He was able, okay, not to move, but to get erection, and probably, to be vulgar, the woman had to sit on him, and he was so glad, oh my God, so even if I remain crippled, there will be chance, and so on, no? So I will have on the subway there to invent some other obscenity, because, you know, when people are desperate, you know, the only way that works is to treat them like this. I remember I had a blind friend, student, not really friend, and I asked him, are you really blind, or do you just pretend to be blind so that women thinking that you don't see them would undress, change their no? And he embraced me and said, finally, a guy who treats me normally. Not all those who are saying, you know, oh, do you need help? Should I cut your steak? And so on. So, okay, so let's, there are many more things, you know, I prefer to send you some stuff because, okay, I will give you just a kind of a very brief resume. From all this stuff, I wanted to say that today we should rethink our future without any reference to what Lacan calls the big other. We should abandon this notion of future as something which is part of the evolutionary cycle where the history is moving and so on and so on. In this sense, we have to move beyond the ethical. The ultimate ethical act involves what I call political suspension of the ethical. The real problem today is, and here I disagree with Habermasians, is not to elaborate a new universalist ethics which will ground our endeavors, but to really reinvent it without any metaphysical grounding, in the sense of, oh, it's in some larger sense part of our spiritual legacy. No, we have to reinvent it. And Alenka, in her book, Zupančić, on Antigone, point this out nicely. I already spoken, plagiarizing here a year ago when about this, of how this is what she changed my mind about Antigone. This is what Antigone does. Her true act is not applying the already existing eternal laws, like this, I'm evil here, Judith Butler liberalism. You know, my reproach to her is that, and she admitted this once, that she is still just a radical liberal. Like, you know, nobody should be excluded, everybody should be included. Even if you are a criminal, you deserve blah, blah, blah. But Yes, this is the best known passage from Antigone. You know, this eternal laws created neither by God nor by people, blah, blah. But my God, read 10 pages later, when she says it's, and everybody is embarrassed, all conservatives, included Judith Butler, when she says it's only for my brother. If it were to be my father, who cares? He is dead. If it were to be my sons, I can marry again and get other children. Only my brother. So her rule is, she does introduce a new universality, but as a crazy act of exception. It is totally crazy what she does. That's where the title of Alenka's book, Let Them Rot, comes. When she says, she doesn't care about thousands of people, let them rot. I only care about my brother. This is not simply particularity. No, in this way, she introduces a new universality. So who is here to be criticized? Criticized, stupid to say, rejected. I think that even somebody who you would have thought is beyond this temptation of the big other, remains here for me too metaphysical, Jacques Derrida. I like early Derrida where it was just deconstruction, not in this stupid sense, but in the sense of showing the blah, blah, blah. And then his ethico-political term, democracy to come, the idea that there is some, although we will never arrive there, future utopian point when all accounts will be settled. For example, once I was dining with Avital Ronell. Remember her scandal? Yes. Did I tell you? You know what's the solution? And people don't talk about that. She won totally. You know why? Because the guy who accused her, her lawyers found what was a fake. She was the fourth case of it. She already did the same thing 3 times in Jerusalem, trying to blackmail a professor through accusing him, and all those accusations about her now. Okay, but what I want to say is that we were eating some chicken, very stupidly, and then she said, but what about when there will be a Nuremberg trial of nature against what horrible thing we did to nature? You see, although she knew this will never come, but she, I think, properly applied Derrida's notion of deconstruction as infinite justice. In the sense of deconstruction means in every existing ethical project, political project, you bring out its inconsistency, injustice, and so on. And even if we never will get there, ultimately, you have to have this infinite horizon of injustice, where all our ethical depths will be settled, and so on and so on. I think the really difficult thing is to abandon this. This is, I think, a benevolent fiction. It's not dangerous because you are always aware that this will become a utopian point, but it's for me too teleological. The other one, whom I appreciate immensely, and I think he falls into the same trap, is my good Japanese friend. I have now 2 good Japanese friends. One is, and you should invite him, because he's not yet so famous, you can get him, but he's now getting famous, very popular. You know Kohei Saito, the eco-Marxist? His book sold I envy him, half a million copies in Japan. Okay, this is Kohei Saito, and then our old friend Kojin Karatani. He claims that today his big idea, there is some sense in it, is that we have to make a move from modes of production to modes of exchange. Because he claims that with capitalism, something happens, our exchange with nature is no longer exchange in the spiritual sense. You know, he claims that in more authentic, ancient society, let's say you killed an animal, a bear, a buffalo, whatever. But then in some ritual, you are aware that you are indebted to it. You have somehow to repay your debt. Even our violence towards animals was part of some kind of spiritual exchange with nature where you have to show respect. It's a spiritual exchange. And he claims that with modernity, where we simply, as what Heidegger attributed to Jews, we simply just exploit nature, there is no authentic spiritual exchange. So his idea is that the price we are paying for this absence of exchange, in the sense that nature is not our partner, but simply an object to be exploited, is ecological crisis. And that the solution, the only solution, because today's ecological crisis is some kind of a revenge of nature for its ruthless exploitation, that we should return to the logic of exchange with nature. Nature is not just object to be exploited, it's a kind of a spiritualized others to whom we should be indebted, and so on and so on. Well, I don't want to lose time. I just want to conclude, maybe if you allow me then 5 minutes more, with the idea that I don't believe in this. I claim that such logic of exchange obfuscates us to the, how should I put it, total meaninglessness of nature. In nature, things happen, and we, insofar as we are part of nature, we have to accept this. Now I read, because I'm secretly superstitious and always afraid. You know how they always discover some asteroid or whatever, which maybe in 2 years it will hit Earth and so on and so on. Yes, it can happen. So what? It's meaningless. The trick to do here is to precisely avoid the logic of, did we do something wrong? Is nature taking revenge of us? No, nature is not stupid in the sense of stupidity, but stupid in the sense of, if the term nature has any meaning, it means utter, absolute indifference. Which is why I also, as many intelligent ecologists do, totally reject this idea of, which is so arrogant, 2 points of deep ecology. The first, the idea that also natural objects, not only animals, but rivers, mountains, have certain rights. Yeah, but the problem is that they don't know it. We, you know, precisely when we want to be open to nature, we elevate ourselves as the only universal beings. We can speak for the rights of all of them. No, they don't have rights. This doesn't mean we shouldn't take care of it. But let's be frank. Why? And this can be so nicely shown by detailed analysis of, I read some deep ecological texts. When they speak about how we should take care of nature because we are a part of it and so on, I will be now very brutal. What this means is that we should take care of nature so that the natural environment will remain livable for us. We really don't care about nature. We care about us. you know, and it's clear, just read the text. Temperatures rise for 3 degrees Celsius. Yeah, why do we care about it? Fuck nature. It's about it will be more difficult for us and so on. Nature, it's difficult to accept it. This is the most important aspect of today, maybe, of Lacan's The Big Other. Nature is not the big other. Nature is totally indifferent. Or as I like to put it, not only society doesn't exist or whatever, nature also in this sense doesn't exist. Or as the young Lukács, apparently the most subjectivist one, beautifully said, nature is a social category, which doesn't mean it doesn't exist out there. No, it means that in every historical epoch, what we understand as nature, as natural, changes. In medieval times, nature was penetrated by ghosts, spirits, and so on. In early modernity, it was object of mechanical exploitation. Then with quantum physics now it's changing and so on and so on. Okay, you know what? Maybe I should stop now so that at least you get, although, can I just tell you, and you will get it, but it's already in philosophical song. I wanted to repeat something came to me as a philosophical reflection. You know, the last sentence of Wittgenstein's Tractatus, whereof, this is very clumsy English translation, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. Wovon man nicht sprechen kann, darüber muss man schweigen. I love this. You know why? First, because it's an obvious nonsense. I mean, first you say it's like a woman telling you whom you want to seduce, and I'm consciously vulgar now. You are not able to fuck me. That's why you shouldn't fuck me. I mean, it's nonsense. If you say we cannot speak about it, why then do you prohibit something which is already impossible? No, here things get complicated. Of course, Wittgenstein is aware that the problem is that the entire metaphysics is in speaking about things about which you cannot say really meaningfully anything. The second problem here is that there is a nice, not explicated enough by Wittgenstein, ambiguity here. This, whereof one cannot speak, can be understood as a simple impossibility, like we cannot do it even if we try, or it can be understood as an ethical prohibition. Like, you know some dirty private things about me, sorry, I don't allow you to speak about it. Keep silent about it. But then what interested me, very briefly, we go through it, is that if I try to build all the variations of this Wittgenstein's phrase, like what if we turn it around? Whereof one cannot be silent, thereof one must speak. It's a deeply meaningful political injunction when horrible things happen in Gaza and so on. We simply shouldn't keep silent. We should talk about it. Then we have another version. Whereof one cannot be silent, thereof one must be silent. It also works perfectly as a conformist vision, which is ethics, which is, even if you know that something horrible is going on and ethically you cannot keep quiet about it, you should keep quiet. Better for you. Keep quiet. Then the other around, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one should speak. It's the best definition of poetry that I know. This here is, would you agree, an old Adorno girl, would you agree that I never agreed with Adorno? He is the only serious guy in critical theory, where he says, poetry is not possible after Auschwitz. I'm tempted to say something very primitive. No, prose is not possible. Exactly, poetry is. Because prose means you simply describe what goes on, documentary. There is something obscene in it. Only poetry, with its ambiguity, can do it. But then Wittgenstein goes a step further and says, wovon man nicht sprechen kann, das zeigt sich. Whereof one cannot speak, that shows itself. And this category is crucial today, I claim. Not its reversal, which would have been what whereof one cannot, what doesn't show itself, we must speak about it. This is simple vulgarity, in the sense of there are hidden things, we don't see them, they don't show themselves, so let's investigate, speak about what we don't see. Much more important is this one, where one cannot speak, that shows itself. Wittgenstein is here, and I will conclude in 2-3 minutes, if you are stupid enough to believe me. Sorry. You know, Wittgenstein is here too quickly appropriated by some cheap spiritual mystics, that he means there are the ultimate mystical experience, secrecy. We can only experience it in silence, the way it shows itself. But look at what Wittgenstein is really saying. He gives a couple of wonderful examples, more actual today than at his time. He says honesty. Honesty is something that can only show itself. If you talk all the time, I'm honest, I have dignity, you are self-refuting itself. You know, a dignified person doesn't proudly claim I am dignified. He simply shows this by his, her, their, its acts. It's something that must be displayed in how you act. Of course, Wittgenstein would have immediately conceded, of course you can talk about it, but not in the first person. It's only from outside. You can describe what in our society counts as dignified behavior and criticize it also, how dignity often involves brutal domination. But the point is that you cannot in the first person talk about your dignity. At this level, it can always be shown. And here, to conclude, really, I will mention a guy whom I really like. I think I mentioned him yesterday already. Jon Elster, the Norwegian theorist of rational action, who introduced the wonderful notion of things which are essentially byproducts, like numerous examples. Precisely, let's say, dignity. You must, in a spontaneous way, act with dignity. The moment you try to act consciously with dignity, it self-destroys. It destroys itself. And my point here is that, and this would be, I'm sorry she is not here, my very friendly answer to Jacqueline Rose, who often, when I made my tasteless jokes about feminism, blah, blah, she said, and she did hit a point, I admit it, that she draw upon this Lacanian opposition between enunciation and enunciated. At the level of enunciated, I was just describing horror. When I described some horrors about how but at the level of my position of enunciation, I secretly enjoyed it. Maybe, I don't care. My defense is that this precisely defines cancel culture, for example. I will use now the same opposition. At the level of enunciated, I often agree with it. Yes, cancel culture detects exclusions, is for inclusion, diversity. But at the level of enunciation, all it does is excluding. You are out because you said this, and so on. In other words, precisely to refer to Wittgenstein, it talks about inclusion and diversity, but what it shows, displays, is exclusion at its purest. With this now, believe me or not, I'm really finito.
Thank you. So we have a few minutes.
17 minutes.
17 minutes. How lucky you are.
Not a second more.
For discussion, so keep it brief.
Because I like this manipulation, you know.
Oh, goodness,
if you want more questions, you are really hurting my friend Hanif, who is there.
May I start?
Let's go there first. Oh, okay.
Sorry. Thank you very much. My question is about something you started referring at the beginning. I'd like to know how you incorporate notions of error, failure, and misunderstanding in your construction of ideas and meaning, so on your daily class. Thank you.
Error,
failure and misunderstanding.
I will not go now, I don't have time into, because they are very, error is for me not so interesting because it's simple empirical category. I look there, my eyes are not good, and I don't know. I think I see 4 persons, there are 3 persons, or whatever. Failure and misunderstanding is where my heart starts to burn, because as I developed in my book, but I'm not satisfied by its conclusion, Hegel in a wired brain, this is where I see a problem with artificial intelligence. Yes, we all know the mechanisms are now algorithms already so developed that artificial intelligence can, as they say, learn from mistakes. Gradually learn new lessons, incorporate, correct itself, and so on and so on. But I think what it cannot do is precisely, and maybe we return thereby to this distinction between saying, displaying. I wonder, and I'm not bluffing here, I spoke with so-called specialists who almost agreed with me. They wanted just to be a little bit more optimist. How? That, you know, I always insist that what specifies human speech is not only that we learn through failures, but that sometimes to deliver something, to put it in Wittgenstein's term, to display it, to show it, it's only so that you fail at the level of what you say. And I usually gave here, I mentioned this in this room already 5 times in the last decade, and it's a disgusting movie, but it's a good example. You know, I'm ashamed to mention it. 4 weddings at the funeral, sorry. You remember Hugh Grant makes this love statement with all the mumbling, stumbling, blah, blah, blah. That's the only way to express, to display love. If he were to say it perfectly, it would have been instantly suspicious. And I will give you a much more traumatic example. That's why I find it so obscene when women who report on a rape are then asked the usual police annoyance. Now you said this, but 5 minutes before you said it differently. So how? I would, if anything, for me, such small inconsistencies display the true trauma. If, but I in principle believe they're women, of course, but if I were to be a male chauvinist who is suspicious, you know, this dirty stuff, like, what if she secretly wanted it, no? I would be much more suspicious if a woman delivers a perfectly consistent narrative. Now, my problem, you see my distinction. It's not just you can learn from mistakes, but it's that there are domains, not some mystical domains, but everyday life, when the true message, to refer to Wittgenstein, can be displayed only through failure and misunderstanding. Misunderstanding is even my favorite category. For example, in a remark when he tries to dismiss modern British democracy, Marx, it's not a point if we agree with him or not, but he says something wonderful. He says that the whole British parliamentary democracy is based on a misreading, wrong interpretation of some ancient medieval documents, you know. And his point is not they were stupid, no. His point is more intelligent one, that such a misunderstanding was necessary. Sometimes the most productive thing to do is to misunderstand things. So at this level, I'm just asking you, I don't know, maybe you know more. I will have a much greater faith into ChatGPT and all that stuff if they can do this. If they can kind of not just correct failure, but stick to the failure as the only thing to deliver certain messages. Because I don't know if I already improvised this yesterday on this. Yes, I did, I think. You know, all that point that here I'm anti-Habermasian. I think language was made to lie. That the original function of language is not, it's not, here Engels is too vulgar. Engels, whom I admire, you remember what I said yesterday, he saw World War I, but where in his, the origin of what? Man from ape, work, blah, blah. He still, in a rather primitive way, tries to generate the need for language from complex interaction. He even said at some point in the short text that when cooperation among people developed, they saw that it's too complex, that they need language to coordinate their acts. I find this so naive that it's almost beautiful in its tautology. Engels is saying, as if, you know, we collaborate in a primitive ape way, then some of us says, oh my God, listen, this doesn't go without language. Outside language, you will get the idea, as if already you are standing out of yourself and already had the idea. You know, again, sorry, I cannot go on indefinitely.
Okay, let's have another question.
Oh my God! Fuck your hand.
Hi, Slavoj.
Hi.
Just over here.
Extreme right. Yeah.
Yes.
I see, yeah.
I'm extreme left from my perspective, so.
And I admit it. Your perspective is the correct one. You know, because in Parliament, left, right, it's not from podium; it's from down there. So I concede the point. Yes.
You're a centrist in any case here, so.
That's a really nasty thing. When we, the people, take power, gulag for you, you know. Okay, let's go on. Sorry, I'm losing time. Sorry, please.
At the start, you spoke about people committing violence without shame. I think it was in relation to Israel-Palestine stuff. I think that...
Sorry, can I interrupt you? And then I will let you on.
Sure, yeah.
Sometimes I'm tempted by naive humanism. Are they really without shame? What if they, it's an empirical constatation, what if they invent all this? We need to suppress about human, blah, blah, blah. Nonetheless, secretly, they are ashamed. And then there are different ways of dealing with this shame. You, like the Stalinists, contributed to your secret bourgeois nature or whatever. But I'm more and more convinced that, you know, all this idea, today people are totally shameless and so on and so on. I wonder if they really are. I'm very sorry, please go on.
I was actually going to make the same point. Shamelessness and pride are not the same thing. And I think one's the negation of shame and pride is something different.
No, the more interesting, now I ask you a question, but I think it's in our common interest. You know, my good Austrian friend, not a Nazi, I'm saying this because, as we all know, Austrians were more Nazis than Germany, you know this. And they did an ingenious thing in 1945. They proclaimed themselves the first victims of Nazism. Because okay, sorry.
Sure, yeah.
Robert Thaler, in his book, developed nicely the difference between shame and guilt, claiming that guilt is internal, while shame is external. That's the traditional notion, which usually also can be given a Eurocentrist racist spin, like the Asiatic primitives only know about shame because they don't have true inner spiritual life, they blah, blah, but we Western people have guilt. Guilt means you feel guilty in your own eyes. You are ashamed in front of others. So what do you do with this? For me, the opposition is not so much pride versus shame as guilt versus shame. And I think that in his book, I think it's not yet translated into English, on shame, he proves with excellent examples. I think there is a subchapter in my last book on freedom on this, so I will not bore you, how this simply doesn't work. In the sense of shame, shame also works if you are alone. Shame is not in front of others, it's in front of the big other, which is here also, where when you are alone. And sorry, how would you react to this then? Where does guilt enter your question?
Where I was going to go with the question was, I wasn't thinking about guilt when I asked it. I was going to ask about how the transition to that position of shameless violence might emerge in a particular historical moment. And I've been thinking about some stuff you wrote in The Universal Exception a long time ago, your discourse theory about fascism and so on, and the way it relates to the Lacanian real. And I just wondered if you might elaborate on that link between the traumatic eruption of social antagonism and the move to shameless violence.
I must admit, this was long ago. Yes. What I would have said is nonetheless that to return to shame and Robert Thaler, his convincing insight is that shame in general, in its a priori structure, is not you are ashamed when you have not enough. Shame is always a sign of too much. Something is visible, which is the original, trigger warning, vulgarity, original situation of shame for me. Let us say, trigger warning, vulgar, that you run to a toilet and all the shit comes out noisily and so on. And then all of a sudden, since you were in such a panic, you see that there are 3 people there observing you. I mean, this is shame. It's too much, even if it's in the vulgar sense. Shame is, this is why some leftists, and I claim they are small bourgeois, wrong, corrupted leftists, claim, I don't know how it is here, in Slovenia, my country, it's now fashionable to say, you should be ashamed if you have too much money. Like in principle, having more money than average must be some crime, it's shameful. There is an element of obvious truth in it. But my answer to this is nonetheless, are these people aware how strange how far this position is towards the stance of ordinary poor people. No, all they want is more money, because they are really poor, I claim this shame of having too much money is something that I don't like. It's a much more perverted stance, either of envy towards those who have money, but envy also in the sense that you would like to have money, or kind of a secret enjoyment in having too much money. Again, my point is that, okay, to go to the end, to this Freudian vulgarity, it's a naive notion. If we are looking about zero-level situation of shame, it's not that what Freud describes, and it's much more complex, but it can be put naively, as the situation of experience of castration. A small boy sees a naked girl and, but there is nothing there, where penis should be. No, the original object of shame is penis itself. My God, there is something where there should have been more natural, which is why, as I already improvised here, it's a very naive observation, but I appeal to your dirtiest selves. Can you imagine anything more vulgar than a man, naked man, walking around with erected penis? It's too much, it's extremely, there is too much of it. It's shame. Not only shame in, that's another difference that I would like to add here, introduced by Fowler. The mystery of shame, and here you can see empirically why the big other is always here, is that I can also be ashamed for another. For example, when you witness somebody doing something vulgar, isn't even in your language also, I think, usual to say, I feel ashamed for having to watch this and so on. While guilt doesn't work like this. If you were to kill my mother, apart from giving you money for gratitude, fucker, even if it would fit my secret designs perfectly, I wouldn't share your guilt. But shame, this is the mystery of shame. Again, how can I also feel, and it often happens like this. I think it was even with these eternal debates now in American Congress, when some vulgar populist right-winger is saying something vulgar, racist, sexist, and so on, and the opposite leftist Democrat, whatever, says, I feel ashamed for you, or whatever. So it can be also that, if you are a conservative and I am the good leader, that you say something shameful, but I feel ashamed. You don't feel ashamed at all. Sorry, that's all. I don't have more to say.
Okay, have we got time for one more, or are you?
Yeah. Let's say one more. Yeah.
So desperate.
That is really happy. Have a big question about the contemporary politics of China and the future politics of China. The first one is, there is a very famous scholar of Zizek study, just call him W. Yeah, when he practicing his political thoughts. Yeah, the cause of his political is use the 3 big rights to replace the 3 small rights. The 3 big rights is survive and the development and the liberate, and the small 3 right is is Leninism, is free association, and give up the right to work and to talk with the company to against them. Yeah, and there are so many guys disagree with his political opinion, especially to against especially against his practice on the power in the right of survival. Yeah, because his action is reformism. You know, he developed the let me find a word.
I'm sorry, I don't know. Can you repeat? Did you? No. Sorry, the name of the guy you are.
Yeah, I didn't catch the name.
Yeah, also.
He is popular on the network, but he is not the scholar of the university. Yeah, yeah.
What's his name?
His name is Simo Liu.
How?
Simo Liu. Yes. Yeah, he is a
small, like opposite to big.
Yeah, he's a very famous scholar of genetic study in the network. And let's talk about the right of survival continually. His action is public beneficial activities. You know what you said in that book called Iraq borrowed cattle. Yeah. Yeah. To these actions will have the reproduction of the capitalism. Yeah. And but why the W has these opinions? Because he thinks the firstly is the culture circumstance. Yeah, the people cannot give up the dimension of enjoyment. Not only the enjoyment of the daily life. For example, the Holocaust term falling, but also the enjoyment of the basically illusion, that the illusion of revolution. They are fantasizing. There is the mall can come back again and lead us to the revolution. Yeah,
Yeah, but I know, but oh my God, simply, I got some fragments for what you said, but I would simply like to know more, because I do know some thinkers in China today. My friend, with whom I don't always agree, Wang Hui, who is now more or less an official figure, I learned, Then there is, I forgot his name, the guy who preaches kind of a return to this ancient Chinese way of deliberate democracy. It's more Confucian. He even doesn't refer to Marx and so on. But, okay, tell me something which maybe this guy, does he publish in books, or is it just a digital presence on the web?
Never, just his thesis of his...
How is it then that he is not censored? Does the party tolerate him, the public power? This is always a question to ask in China.
There is a few times he encountered the big power of the party. Because and why he gave up the Leninism is today to Leninism's revolution is impossible, because we have the most most powerful check system. Yeah, and
you mean China digitally? We are all controlled and so on. Yes. Yeah. But on the other, no, sorry. Obviously, I cannot answer because, I need what Heidegger would have called the hermeneutic background. To know.
My question is, how we will evaluate the action of W, and what can we do in this?
Yeah, but I don't know. I didn't get, maybe did you enough the picture of this guy. What I like about China is that I know not only this guy, I know that there are not only, I mentioned it at the beginning of my freedom book, I think, some ordinary worker who read Heidegger, translated him, and become a sensation. Like these moments are wonderful. But where I remain an old Eurocentric guy. Now it's very popular to say European liberal democracy is in crisis, which is true. So then they try to bring in some more collective spirit, deliberative, oriental, and so on and so on. I'm tempted to be very skeptical about it. For example, and that's all I can say now to conclude. You know, I had debate with some Chinese people which said, but our system is not as obscure as you think. Nonetheless, with all the control, somehow those in power receive, process what people care about, try to harmonize it, and so on. But you know what is for me crucial, and it's in my totalitarian spirit almost my favorite aspect. Look, you know, when you have every 4 years or 2 the Congress of the Communist Party, the big event everybody waits for is, I think, at the end, when 7 members of the standing committee of the Politburo are nominated. Of course, formally they are elected, but it's a magical moment because it's absolute. There is no debate about which persons will be elected. It's the big decision. Everybody knows intense negotiations are going on in the background. This is the magical event. You learn these guys won. But how did these guys win? And wait a minute, be careful. I am not saying, oh, this means China is totalitarian. I like this. I think that every government should be, to be efficient, at some level non-transparent. I don't believe, but what we in the West know, and it's not specific to the West, I think Karatani, whom I mentioned, once said something totally crazy. He said that the difference between bourgeois and socialist democracy is that in bourgeois democracy, you are elected for your qualities, better qualified in principle, let's forget, but that in people's proletarian democracy, you are elected by lot, by lottery. And I more and more think that this non-transparency should be integrated not as some secret power, but as an element of chance, lottery. Many powers knew this, like you know how it was in ancient Greece. Okay, it was limited to men, free men in power, but then it was lottery. It was the same in Venice, Venetian Republic, how the boss was dominated. It was an absolutely crazy system of, first you had 100 candidates, then some committee took looking at their qualities, selected half. Then by lot, they were reduced to 10, where again, some committee went through them, reduced them to 5, where again, lots were thrown, lottery, who wins, and so on. I think there is no democracy without this element of chance unpredictability. If you want, and this is my Hegelian argument, but in a people's democracy, it can be taken over by lottery. That's why I liked Hegel's crazy justification of monarchy. If you read it closely, Hegel's point is monarch is an idiot. His function is to screw his wife and produce her a successor, and it doesn't matter. All a good monarch has to know is how to behave properly and so on. And as Hegel said, his only function is to sign the decrees which are prepared by others experts. What Hegel saw clearly is, and today in our technocratic times where experts rules, is more important by ever, is don't trust the experts to be on the top. We need experts for ecology, blah, blah, more than ever, but there must be an element of chance where at the top, and without this, democracy has no meaning. Not only we all vote, but on the very top of power, that should be somebody who is not qualified by some special capacities, but who is in principle like us. That's also, for me, the basic principle of justice as Hegel developed. Yes, you have the biggest invention for me of good legal system is, how do you call, my God, the five idiots? Sorry? Jury. Yeah, jury is precisely this principle of non-elitism. Yes, we need lawyers, blah, blah, to explain, but at the end, five idiots in the sense like all of us, collected by lot will decide. That's for me, without this, democracy is not really a democracy. Sorry, now I will have to run. Okay. You will get the text this evening. If you want something, I will not forget in the evening to send you. I'm very sorry that I have to